Hello, everybody. This is Miss Bennett, and I'm going to be going over our lecture for our Unit 2, which is First Contact. And today we're going to be going over the European exploration of the Americas. This is going to be starting about 1492 to 1650. That's our time frame for this unit. And we're going to see three major European powers that are going to be starting and launching expeditions around the world looking for routes to Asia and stumbling into the Americas instead. So these three groups we're talking about is Spain, England, and France. Those are our three major players for this unit. They each have their own different goals and methods and impacts on the world and through these explorations. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right. First thing is why they wanted to explore in the first place. We have these three major players, France, Spain, and England. So what are they doing it for? Like I mentioned, the first thing they're looking for is this search for Asia. Okay. As European merchants wanting faster, cheaper routes to Asia for spices, silk, and other luxury goods, they're looking for sea routes to get there. Currently, the land routes, and they have to go all the way through Europe and all the way into Asia, are super expensive. They're controlled by people that don't want them to be there, and they're looking for faster ways to get there. Second thing is there's economic competition. The European kingdoms are competing with each other for wealth and for power pretty consistently through this entire time period. It's sort of like a race to the best for England, France, and Spain. So finding new trade routes and any ways that they can get to those luxury goods faster, but also maybe the idea of finding new things like gold, anything can impact them and their wealth would be very helpful. And the third thing is religious missions. Okay. A lot of these countries have deeply held religious beliefs at this time period. They're just coming off of the Renaissance, where like most of the people in the countries, especially the rulers, have very deeply held religious beliefs. So they believe it's their duty to spread Christianity to the world, really. And these are going hand in hand with political and economic goals. So we're going to see them trying to convert anybody that they can find. So at this point, we have our three major countries. They are going to be right here. We have England's up here, and then France and Spain are down here. And this is what they think the entire world looks like, okay, is just this bit that's in color right here. They kind of know this place exists in the land. This is actually a copy of what one of those maps looks like, okay? And it's much different than the map that we know today. They had no idea any of this existed, not even really a good idea that Australia was around there. Had a little bit of the tip of Iceland up there, but that's pretty much it. So no concept. So they think that if they leave from this shore and they're trying to get down here to India, if they sail west, they will magically end up down here because they're going to go around the world and then end up over here. So they say what? Sail west, and that's not the case. So the first people to do so is Spain. So this is our first major key player that we're going to be talking about here, and they're going to be the first ones to arrive in 1492. Christopher Columbus, the man who finds the Americas, has this obsession with trying to sail west from Europe and believes that he will arrive in the eastern of Asia. Okay. He is asking everybody and their mother to let him go on this expedition. He's looking for money. He's looking for ships. He's looking for the ability to do this. He's asking Portugal and he's asking France and he's asking England. He's asking Spain, and nobody's taking him seriously until finally the king and queen of Spain really need new trade routes because they're getting kind of boxed out of the spice market. And so they say, okay, fine. Like, we don't think this is going to work. We think you're probably going to die at sea, but it's something better than nothing. So we're going to give you the money. So he goes ahead and he leaves from Spain and he sails west, hoping to find India. And he does find land in October of 1492. He lands in the Bahamas. He lands at Bahama Islands. And he's completely convinced he's reached islands south of Asia. And he's looking for India. So he decides to call the natives Indians. Okay. If you look over here, this is our map. They're in this very bottom section down here of Europe. And he's going to sail directly west. And he reaches the Bahamas right there. So he reaches them and he is super thrilled. He's like, I have done it. And so he is going to trade European goods to these natives for gold. And he's going to leave some men behind and say, hey, kind of keep track of things for me. And I'll be back to come get you. But those Spanish men start mistreating the natives, and the natives just decide to kill those men in retaliation. So it's sort of like our first bloodshed, and it's the first sense of violence that we have for these expeditions, violence which is going to continue to happen. So, there are three goals for the Spanish coming to the Americas. First thing is the reason that they set out on the voyage in the first place is wealth and gold. They want, as soon as they realize that this is not India and this is not Asia and this is an entirely untapped land altogether, they realize that there are so many resources here for the taking. So they go ahead and they start like mining for gold, and there's quite a bit of gold in the Americas at this time. So their primary goal is extracting as much wealth as possible from their new colonies. They're like, well, these people belong to us, and we should be able to take anything that we find. They're searching relentlessly for gold, silver, gemstones, anything valuable that they can ship back to Europe, and they do end up finding quite a bit. While they're there, they figure, oh, well, we're such good Catholics and we're such good Christians, we might as well start spread Christianity. So they send Spanish missionaries who are going to build churches and missions throughout the colonies. They're going to be working to convert the native people to Christianity, often by force, saying, okay, either convert or die. And some people do, they decide to take the L and die for their religion, but a lot of times people are going to convert to save their own lives. The third goal that they have is territorial control. Spain is claiming vast territories of Mexico, the southwestern United States, Florida, the Caribbean islands, even into South America, and they're establishing super strict control over these lands. They are not lenient. They are pretty much dictators over these people, and they are trying to say, we want you to do what we want, and if you don't do it, we're going to kill you. And so they effectively enslave the native people that they come across, force them to convert to Christianity, and then just completely deplete their lands of any sort of resources that they have. So if we're trying to establish a bad guy in this unit, it's going to be the Spanish. The Spanish are the bad guys in this narrative. Okay. To go along with this, they create what's called the encomienda system. It's a harsh system to control labor of Native Americans. Under the system, Spanish colonists receive grants of native villages, and the villagers are forced to pay taxes through labor or goods. So if you can imagine, you're just chilling at home, and this guy comes in and says, hey, actually, I own your house now, and I'm going to take over everything that you've got going on, and actually you need to pay me taxes to just live here. And you're like, I don't really want to do that. And they're like, well, it's actually not the worst of it. The worst of it is that we're going to force you to do labor, and we're going to turn you into slaves and make you pay taxes. So it's not good. It's supposed to protect native people, teach them Christianity, sort of create these like towns that are run by the Spanish, but it really is just like a form of slavery that's going to just devastate native communities. The system allows Spain to extract and take enormous wealth from the Americas while also giving Spanish colonists power over native people. It's leading to cultural destruction, population decline, generations of conflict. So instead of these Spanish people coming in and being good stewards and being helpful and trying to create good systems, instead they are coming in as like mini dictators and turning these previously freed people into slaves. It's not great. So after Spain comes in 1492, a couple years later, England realizes what's going on. In 1497, they also enter the race. They're like, can see all the money that's coming out of the Americas, seeing how successful that they are being, and they also want a hand in it. So they start building better boats, and they are off to the races. England is sending a navigator named John Cabot to find the Northwest Passages, a hope for a water route through North America to reach Asia for trade. Okay. Um, this is the Northwest Passage, or what they were hoping to find. So they would go over the top of North America and kind of come in and out of all these islands out the other side. Over here, you can see the Bering Sea and into Russia, and then cross over and be able to get a closer route into Asia. The problem with this is, if you know anything about the geography of this area, is it is straight up ice. It is not good. It is like ice, and it is cold, and it is super hard to get through. So while they're up there, they're just still using these wooden boats, and their ships are going to get absolutely destroyed by what is up here. So as they're trying to find what they think is the Northwest Passage, this is not an actual waterway. This is what they hoped they could find. Instead of that, ooh, just a little bit bigger picture. Instead, they're finding present day Canada, and they're going to claim it for the English king. It's going to be their first like settling down in North America. But they're going to continue to search along the Atlantic coast, creating more accurate maps of North America. They're going to go up and down the Atlantic coast, mapping as they go to try and get a lay of this new continent that they find. In doing so, they create the Jamestown settlement in 1607. English establishes their first permanent settlement in Jamestown, Virginia, and marks the beginning of English colonization in North America. This is when we see the first people settling in North America. But this is almost 100 years later, from 1497 to 1607. That's 114 years after they first find the continent until we have our first permanent settlement by the English. So it does take a really long time for us to see people actually living in the Americas, and trying to build a life there. Up until this point, nobody's really created any permanent settlements that are doing any sort of good, and it's taking quite quite a long time. So, the English colonists have a strategy. The first thing is establishing farming colonies. Unlike Spain's focus on extracting wealth, England wants to provide established permanent farming communities that could provide food and raw materials. Remember, we talked about those raw materials in your vocab lab, things like wood, tobacco, cotton, things that corn, things that they can grow and then ship back to England to get processed over there into finished materials. So, they're going to be trying to establish these farming communities. One of the ways that they're going to do that is they're going to actually learn farming techniques from the Native Americans who are going to help them, um, and teach them how to farm, which is going to be great. The second thing is trade networks. The English colonies develop extensive trade relationships, shipping tobacco, lumber, and other goods back to England while importing manufactured products. So when ships show up to their shores, they are going to load them with wood and cotton and tobacco and corn and things like that, and then ship them off to England. And when the ships come back to get more supplies, they're going to bring them things like finished shirts. They're going to bring them um, pipes to smoke their tobacco in. They're going to bring them pots and bowls and shoes and all these kinds of things. So they're trading these sort of like raw materials for manufactured products. The third thing also has to deal with religion, but in a different way than the Spanish. The Spanish were trying to convert the Native Americans to Christianity and say, hey, this is our religion. You need to have the same religion. That's actually kind of the opposite of what the English are doing. Most of these people that are leaving England and trying to start an entirely brand new life in the colonies are doing so because of religious freedom. They're looking for religious freedom. They're right now they're have following all of these different religions that are not the primary and dominant religions in England. And so they are leaving because they're promised that they will not be persecuted. They will not be looked down upon for their religious beliefs in these new colonies. So up and down the Atlantic coast, they're creating all these different settlements, which is going to become the 13 original colonies. And most of them have different religious beliefs, as we're going to talk about. And they're going to be very different from each other because they're seeking religious freedom. So instead of religious conversion, now we're going into looking for religious freedom to be able to believe whatever you want to believe. So they might be doing a little bit of converting of the Native Americans, but for the most part, they are just trying to practice their own religious beliefs, without being persecuted by other people. All right. Third people is France, and they are going to be known as the fur trading empire. So if we remember that Spain came in 1492 and England came in 1497, it's going to be a little bit later that France joins it in 1534, and they're taking a completely different approach to colonization. In 1534, the French explorers searching the coast of Canada, and they established Quebec in 1608 as their first permanent North American settlement. Quebec is pretty far up into Canada. It's along the northwest coast. Up there in the very northern region is where Quebec is. So in 1534, we have this guy, Jacques Cartier. He's exploring the St. Lawrence River, and he claims the region for France. In 1608, Champlain establishes Quebec, the first permanent settlement, and in 1673, French explorers reach the Mississippi River, expanding their territory south. So instead of just settling down in the first place that they see, these are actually going to be a lot of explorers. They're kind of mapping the waterways of North America and finding ways to transport and becoming some of the most reliable map makers of North America at this time, because they are not just settling down, they are going to be really mapping the area and finding ways to transport between them. So the nice thing about this is as they're going, they're building little forts to use as like home bases, and they're going to establish really good relationships with the Native Americans in doing so. Okay. They see the success through partnership. France's strategy is different, and brilliantly so. Instead of conquest and forced labor, they're building partnerships with native tribes for the international fur trade, which is creating the first truly global fur trading network. People love furs and they love them. They love how warm they are. They love how soft they are. They love how like fancy they look. And so they meet with the Native Americans and say, hey, we want to trade furs with you. And in doing so, we're just going to kind of leave you alone. We'll trade you weapons for them. We'll trade you, manufactured goods or food or anything we can. And then you give us these fur traders. And because they become reliant on this fur trading industry, they're treating the Native Americans really well because they want to maintain this fur trading. Okay. So they build trade alliances. French traders form strong alliances with tribes like the Huron, and they create mutually beneficial relationships based on respect and shared economic interests. So if our bad guy for this unit is Spain, our good guy is definitely the French. They're establishing smaller settlements along these rivers and lakes, which are these forts I was talking about. And rather than large scale colonization that displaces Native people, they're just trying to kind of keep themselves. They're not trying to completely take over Native American people's lands. Many French traders are actually going to marry Native women and learn indigenous languages, creating mixed communities and lasting cultural connections. They're not afraid of these people. They don't believe that they're better than them. They're going to intermarry with them. They really have good respect built up in these communities, and it's going to work out really well for them. Some key vocabulary, you can pause this and double check with your vocabulary if your definitions look similar to this one. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So, of everything, geography, we keep coming back to this idea of geography and social studies, and it is shaping everything. The physical landscape of North America creates opportunities and challenges for European colonizers and Native American people alike. Opportunities like fertile soil in river valleys gives good farming communities, extensive river systems providing transportation and trade routes, long coastlines, this whole section of coastline up here with lots of access for ships and fishing, and just abundant natural resources, timber, furs, minerals. This is an untapped land, and they are reaping the benefits of the resources there. But there are also some challenges. I mean, it's vast distances, which makes communication and control difficult. If we think about trying to establish colonies along this entire Atlantic coast, they're not going to be able to communicate very well with each other. Being able to control all of them is going to become very difficult. Because of this, we also have some pretty harsh winters, which is limiting settlement in northern regions. The French that are up there in Quebec are really going to get hit hard with some pretty difficult winters, and it's going to be really hard to maintain. Mountain ranges blocked easy east to west movement. This Appalachian mountain range is going to make it harder for the British settlers to move west. And of course, resistance from established Native communities that have been there for thousands and thousands and thousands of years that really don't want to be losing their land. So we have a lot of pros and we have a lot of cons, making this a really big challenge. So, since we just got done with our last unit talking about Native American societies, it is probably our next big question is to be asking, what is the Native American perspective on first contact? And it is kind of mixed reviews. Native American tribes have sophisticated political systems, they have thriving economies and rich cultures long before the Europeans arrived. So, when the Europeans show up, it's going to disrupt their way of life, sometimes for the positive and a lot of times for the negative. The European view of all of this is that they're seeing an opportunity for wealth, expansion, spreading their religion to new people and new lands, and all of those things are great. But from the Native American perspective, they're bringing disruption to their way of life. They're changing the ways that they've done things for years and years and years, but they're also bringing new trade opportunities and then also serious threats to their land and to their culture. So it really depends. If you're like the Huron tribe that's interacting with the French, you're thinking that's pretty positive. They're forming successful alliances with the Europeans. But if they're the Pueblo people that are facing conquest and cultural destruction and slavery at the hands of the Spanish, their view is going to be pretty negative. So it really depends on who they were interacting with, how long they interacted with them. That depends on their viewpoint, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty negative. So we have to compare our different approaches. Okay, we've got three different approaches to colonialism. First is from the Spanish, which theirs is very much the view of conquest. Okay, they're using military force and the encomienda system to control large territories. They're focusing on extracting wealth and converting native people to Christianity through missions and through slavery. The English are focusing on settlement. They're trying to just create permanent settlements where they can send people to settle down with religious freedoms. But this is going to be pushing Native American people off of their long established lands and creating conflicts through land hunger and expansion along the Atlantic coast. And lastly, we have France, which theirs is really much just partnership, building trade alliances and smaller settlements. They're even intermarrying with Native people and creating more cooperative relationships, but still limiting Native American independence. They're still going to be a little bit controlling, just not as bad as the other two. So we have some lasting effects of colonization. For Europeans, this is going to make them extremely, extremely wealthy. Okay, massive wealth is flowing back to the European kingdoms. New trade networks are connecting continents. European powers are gaining global influence, and Christianity is spreading to new populations. They count all of these things as W's, as wins. But for the native people, it's devastating disease. It's reducing populations by up to 90%. 90% of their people are going to get killed off by disease. They're going to lose a lot of their ancestral lands and their traditional ways of life. They're going to be having forced labor and cultural destruction, and very rarely some new trade opportunities and technologies if we're looking for a silver lining. But it's going to be pretty devastating to these communities. Looking forward, we are going to be talking about this through the year is just seeds of future conflict, territorial competition. There's going to be overlapping land claims by different European powers. Some people thinking, oh, this land belongs to the British or this land belongs to the French, which is going to lead to the French Indian War, which we'll talk about around November. Native resistance with early conflicts like the Powhatan Wars, which are foreshadowing centuries of struggle as Native people fought to protect their lands, and just trying for cultural survival. Despite population decline and displacement, they're developing strategies to preserve their cultures, languages, and identities that still continue today, but are going to cause some conflicts. If you need to go back and fill in any sections of your note taker, you can go ahead and do so. If you have any questions, please let me know.